to reckless Timberwolves trade speculation. Judd Zulgad.
Reckless speculation.
Might not be reckless, Phil.
Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider. He also makes regular appearances on Doogie's Scoop podcast, including this week. And so you can find that on SKORNorth.com. Bobby Marks, thanks for joining the show, man.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
We're doing all right, and it was unexpected. I think when the Wolves landed, when Flip Saunders was still here, and they landed the number 1 pick with Karl Anthony Towns, that was expected because they were the worst team in the NBA, and the lottery at that time was more favorable to their odds. Nobody had any expectations this time around because the Timberwolves have just kind of become an afterthought during COVID with all the other leagues firing up, and so they're sitting on the number 1 overall pick. Our first question to you before we just pepper you with potential names and options is, how valuable do you think the number 1 overall pick is this year compared to a normal year or other years?
Well, it's not as valuable as it was last year.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, it's different when you have Zion or Ja Morant or when Karl Anthony Towns or some of these. There's not a marquee franchise player right now. I mean, that doesn't mean that 5 years from now there might be one developed, but there's not a player identified as kind of a franchise build your team around your player. But even so, it just gives Minnesota a lot of different options. I mean, I think that's when you control the number 1 pick and then you have 17 and 33, it gives you a lot of options if you want to move back in the draft. If there's an established player out there to go out and target. Certainly you can keep the pick, and they're going to have enough time to evaluate all those decisions with the draft likely being moved back from October to who knows, maybe November or December here. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility, something that they didn't have before the night of the lottery.
Who do you think that the Wolves are calling first? So if you get this top pick and then start to make calls, what teams make the most sense, do you think, in this scenario, Bobby, to call first?
Well, I mean, I think the first I want to you're certainly meeting with your scouts and you're figuring out, all right, how much is there separation from, let's say, number 1 and let's say number 8, right? Mm-hmm. So is there a big difference? I think you can make an argument that there's not a drastic difference. This is I think it's actually a good draft. It's just not top heavy in talent here. So in that case, if you're looking at teams like New York, maybe who have a couple future first round picks, they have from the Mavericks, they have the 8th pick, they have a group of young players. I mean, those are type of things that you would be looking at as far as moving back in the draft if it makes sense to build up your assets in your draft pick. So I think that's probably going to be the big internal discussion as far as what is the separation from a guy like LaMelo Ball to Tyrese Halliburton from Iowa State, right? I mean, I think LaMelo is probably the number 1 guy right now, but if you can pick up 2 draft assets and maybe an established player down the road. I mean, I think that's the same with a team like Atlanta, who's I think they're at 6. They've got a decision to make with John Collins. So how does John Collins fit with Karl Anthony Towns? So those are a lot of the different things that you'll be discussing internally here as far as to stay or to move back. And I think the goal is if you can try to upgrade the roster and also get maybe another draft pick, I think that's probably the direction you try to look at.
You can follow Bobby Marks on Twitter, by the way, at Bobby Marks 42, ESPN NBA front office insider. Is there any reason after what the Suns did 8-0 in the bubble and what Devin Booker did, is there any reason to make that phone call with like 4 years left on his contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make the phone call at all 29 teams, no matter what happened in Orlando and them going 8-0. And I think you have to do your due diligence, and usually just kind of keep a notebook of what you proposed and what they said, and you kind of maybe circle back a year from now. You never know, but yeah, I would think that Devin is probably off the table, in any type of deal, just because of what is left on his contract, especially how they played there. They're probably looking to build off that, not really kind of tear down and, build through the draft. I mean, they've been doing that for the last 10 years. And I don't think that's kind of probably be the direction they're going to go.
Exactly. So as far as potential young stars go, who you think might be available on the market, who the Wolves could possibly flip this pick for and possibly more, where do you think that starts realistically? I mean, is a guy like Simmons in Philadelphia a guy that you could potentially try and make a phone call on and trade for, or is that probably shooting too high for Ben Simmons?
Yeah, I mean, probably too high, especially listening to what Elton Brand, their general manager, said yesterday, and I kind of agree with Ellen said, is that you probably want a coach in place, for at least a year to figure out what direction you go with Simmons and Joel Embiid, especially with Ben. I mean, he hasn't even started that rookie extension yet, and he's got another 5 years. But as I said, it doesn't hurt making the calls. I mean, the worst thing they can do is just hang up on you. Usually that doesn't happen all the time, but you never know. I mean, I think it's looking at teams like, where's Brooklyn, right? I mean, they're going to have to go out and pay Joe Harris. I think Harris LeVert's probably untouchable, but it's just calling teams as far as figuring out what's Washington going to do with Bradley Beal. It's trying to find help for Carl and D'Angelo Russell. I mean, you kind of just go through, the list of 29 teams. I always say there's always a team or multiple teams out there that who have been eliminated from the playoffs or maybe thought they were a little bit better and are in the lottery and think that by changing the pieces around it will help. Certainly, we'll see what happens in Sacramento. I think certainly Buddy Hield's contract's a little bit rich for you, and I don't think he's worth the number one pick. But those are just you kind of just go through the checklist of different names, and eventually you kind of get to a decision where, hey, we're keeping this pick. Or maybe we'll take somebody, and then maybe down the road we look to move.
You mentioned Bradley Beal's name, and it's amazing. Like it feels like he's been in the league for like almost a decade. I want to say like 8 or 9 years, but he's not that old. He's only 26 or 27, and he had his breakout offensive season in terms of just scoring. He scored 30 points a game for the first time. And I look at him, Bobby, and I think, man, I get Washington not wanting to let go of the John Wall, Bradley Beal thing because it's never fully come to fruition, and they definitely feel like there's an unwritten story there. But I look at Bradley Beal and think he is just begging inside for a change of scenery and would probably play better defense at his next stop. And I just wonder, to what degree is Washington hell-bent on trying one more time with that backcourt versus, either settling for the Wolves' number 1 overall pick and hitting the reset button, or some kind of a three-way trade that gets them a different player just to shake things up. But Bradley Beal's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, he signed that extension, last off season, so he's locked in for a few more years here. And you're right. I mean, and I wrote about it. It's like, I guess if you're the front office, you do want to see where John Wall's health wise. I mean, John hasn't played since December of 2018.
Yeah.
Kind of pairing those two together, and then you've got some young pieces. But you will probably get at a point in the road that you will have to make a decision here if this does not work out.
Where are the Wolves at in your mind too? Just as far as they've got Cat now, they've got Russell now. How close is this team to being not a championship contender, certainly, but just a contender for a playoff spot?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the challenge, right? I mean, the West is so, and I've said it, it's like the West is so unforgiving, right? Like, I mean, you look at, Dallas was a lottery team, and then you get Luka, and now they're back in the playoffs, right? And then Golden State is going to be in the mix, certainly will be in a probably top 4, top 5 next year. That's the challenge that Gerson is faced with, right? It's like you cannot be content just because you go out and get D'Angelo Russell at the trade deadline. Now, like, all right, what is next? How do we get another player, an established player to play with them? What do we do with Malik Beasley and Juancho Hernan-Gomez in free agency? What are our options with some of our own players here? So I think another year with Ryan helps. And I think you'll be up there where, I think the goal is to try to get where, San Antonio is now, or maybe New Orleans is now, where, Sacramento is now, where you're not kind of buried down in that basement, because once you get down there, I mean, it's hard to kind of come up. And I think, having 17 and 33 are two good picks too. And I think that's another option for them as far as, can we get into the top 15 of the lottery if it makes sense there. And the one thing I know about Gerson, and I've known him a long time, is, and I think you see him this year, is like, he's not content with what the roster is or was. When you turn over, and basically I think Carl and Josh are the only two guys when he took over, that he is going to keep on trying until the last stone is unturned to try to figure this out.
I've got last thing for you. I've got one more Ben Simmons related question, and that if it were me running the 76ers, and that would be a huge mistake by the ownership, but if it were me running the 76ers, I would tend to lean toward keeping Ben Simmons, just because I know it's sort of ironic and that he's the one that's injured right now, but I think the durability is probably less of a question with him. But let's say they decide, all right, we've got to shop one of these guys. It's just not going to work, and we just need a change here. How do 3-team trades generally work? Because I think if Philadelphia were to part ways with, let's say it's Ben Simmons, I don't think it would just be, all right, well, Timberwolves, we'll take your number 1 overall pick and go back into a pseudo rebuild. You would probably have to ship the number 1 pick to a third team. Third team sends an established player to the Sixers, and then Ben Simmons comes to the Wolves. When 3-team trades happen, how does that generally work?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the initial call. I mean, if it's between Minnesota and Philadelphia, and then, if Philadelphia's saying, well, no, I don't like the number 1 pick, find me a team, find me a third team as far as, and you kind of have a list of players that you're looking for, or the Sixers are looking for. It's kind of like a big jigsaw puzzle, right? I mean, it's like you just throw all the pieces down, and then eventually you try to line them up here. And I've been part of a lot of different 3-team, 4-team trades here. It gets complex. I always say it's kind of like a house of cards, right? You kind of build it up, and then you pull one out, and the whole thing falls. But yeah, that's kind of how you look at it. It's basically, you're kind of doing the homework for the other team, as far as if you're shopping one, and if it's that third team there. So, Simmons you're right. I mean, if I was Elton Brand, and if I had to make a choice between Simmons and Embiid, I would not trade Ben Simmons. I would probably look to trade Embiid, just because I value. I'm probably less off of Embiid. I value what Simmons can do on a defensive end. Certainly huge guard here, and what the future kind of holds for him.
Yeah, Bobby Marks, ESPN NBA front office insider. Bobby Marks 42 on Twitter, and we appreciate your insight, sir.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Man. All right. Here it is. I got the trade after what he just said. Oh boy.
Reckless
John Collins. You're going after John Collins.
I love the John Collins idea.
John Collins has been thrown around a lot by him, Doogie.
Power forward that can shoot some threes, grabs rebounds. Imagine having 2 big men that just both can sit outside and shoot from 20 feet and get inside and grab rebounds. Your roster would just be 5 dudes who can all shoot threes.
All right.
So here's what that would be a great trade. Okay. But in terms of a 3-way deal, the 76ers. So I love the Ben Simmons idea. I don't think they're gonna trade him, but this is as available as he has probably been because of just everything that's gone stagnant and wrong in Philadelphia.
Sure.
And they're gonna have a new coach coming in, and the front office is being shaken up. They're not gonna want the number 1 pick because they don't want to rebuild. They want to reload.
Yeah, they've trusted the process long enough. Yes.
Yep. So I would call up Washington and I would say, all right, you guys are a disaster. John Wall hasn't played in 2 years. You guys need the number 1 pick. Like, I know it hurts to hear that, but you guys need the number 1 overall pick. We will give you the number 1 overall pick and even the number 17 pick. You guys can have those things.
Okay.
In return, you will send Bradley Beal, who can shoot threes. Ben Simmons cannot. You'll send Bradley Beal to Philadelphia. So now Philadelphia can have Joel Embiid inside, dominating big man, and Bradley Beal outside shooting threes, and you can have that inside-outside combination. The problem with Philadelphia is they get too stagnant, and
right.
They're too reliant on shots inside of 15 feet, and everything gets bogged down, right?
Ben Simmons can't shoot threes, yeah.
And Ben Simmons comes to the Timberwolves.
Wait, hold on a second. I thought you said so you just basically...
Reckless speculation.
So when you make the phone call to these teams, do you tell them you will do this?
Yes, I take charge.
Like that is they're like, but we don't want to. You're like, no, you will do this.
No, I once completed a 4-team trade in a fantasy baseball league. I told everyone what they were getting and said, is everyone good with this? And they said, oh, this is great. So I get this guy and I give up these 2.
What type of owners are these?
These are great owners, but I did the work. You got to do the work for everyone. I know Declan was just answering the phone. I told Judd I once completed and facilitated a 4-team fantasy baseball trade.
That's absurd.
You got to do homework for everyone else. That's what Bobby Marks said.
You're a GM clearly, and
So I'm
Declan.
so I'm sending the 1st and the 17
Okay,
to
so
Washington.
you got Ben Simmons.
I'm sending Bradley Beal from Washington to Philadelphia.
Yep.
And I'm sending Ben Simmons to the Timberwolves to complete the newest, youngest Big Three.
And
Reckless
Washington
speculation.
and the Sixers have no say in this trade, other than the fact that they will send their players to the
They
new
do
teams.
not. No. But I think they would welcome a 30 points per game outside sniper to work with Joel Embiid
I
on the
do
inside.
think, I'm telling you, Gerson being Gerson, I do think he trades that pick.